Well-meaning friends or colleagues who can't be bothered to say something substantial will enthusiastically encourage you to be yourself, and you're naturally a little nervous. You want to stay as far away from that as possible. So if you want to feel more like yourself while presenting and are not quite sure how, use your core values as your North Star. Welcome to the SpeakerPath Podcast. I'm Jo Jongsma, Presence and Performance Specialist at Clarity Up, and this SpeakerPath episode is about the number one worst piece of advice on speaking in particular and communication in general. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. They'll love you. Just be you. You'll be fine. Just be yourself. Well-meaning friends or colleagues who can't be bothered to say something substantial will enthusiastically encourage you to be yourself when you're about to give a big speech or presentation at work and you're naturally a little nervous. Which is ironic because humanity has been grappling with this question for millennia. So you'd think if it was that easy, we would have figured it out by now. For example, in ancient Egypt, the self was considered to be a multi-part soul with identity tied to the person's name. In ancient Greece, the self became a matter of reason and ethics. We have the famous know thyself as Socrates' moral imperative. Much later, in the 19th century, romantic thinkers saw the self as emotional and creative. And modern and contemporary perspectives look at the self as fragmented and in search of wholeness and constructed and shaped by language and culture and multiple. And this is without even going into any of the religions or the research in psychology or neuroscience that also offer their answers to our existential question. So if being yourself feels somewhat vague or confusing to you, that's because we as a species haven't figured it out yet. And you don't have to figure out humanity's most burning question as you prepare to go on stage. Here's what you can do instead. First off, understand what your audience and the situation require of you. In other words, what's needed in the moment. Is it reassurance, information, compassion, mobilization, relief, guidance, entertainment? Where does your audience need to go? What is getting in their way? And what is it that they need from you at this point on their journey? At Clarity Up, we use a specific framework to pin down all of these psychographics before working on an idea or a talk. More on that in a future episode. And secondly, build the self you want to be. Build your speaking self. And I don't mean play a role or create a character that you put on when you step on stage. That's an approach that I personally find very energy consuming and therefore unsustainable. Also, it gets at the heart of where this advice comes from to just be yourselves. People are tired of inauthentic presenters. It's as simple as that. We all know when we're being played like an instrument, when someone is giving us the speech without really meaning it, but wanting to get a certain reaction out of us. You want to stay as far away from that as possible. Now, a perspective that I adhere to is the one expressed by the Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari. He says that the self is a story that our mind constantly constructs. In other words, we tell ourselves the story about who we are. I find this perspective really empowering because if we're the ones telling the story, it means we can decide how it goes. Over the last 17 years, I've worked with 47 nationalities, and there's one aspect of this identity story that always comes up, and it's the desire to be congruent with one's values. Every speaker at some point will say something like, I want to show excellence. I want to show quality work. I want to connect. I want to show warmth. I want to express my warmth for these people. So these are all values, things that are important to the speaker. Now, one of the first things that I do with my speakers when working on their delivery style is to map out their core values, because values are foundational elements in terms of how we think of ourselves and how we aspire to be at our best. And there are loads of personal values assessments, many online in the form of questionnaires or applications. Some are free, some are not. If you're curious, do a quick search and try it out. Or you can just take a piece of paper or open a new note in your notes app and write down all the values that matter to you without filtering, everything that you can think of. Things like friendship, fairness, health, family, freedom, equality, love, joy, whatever comes to your mind that feels like is an important value to you, write it down, put it on this list. Once you have a list of 20, 30 such words or more, try to cut it down by half. That will make you prioritize. Repeat this cutting down until you're left with your top 3 values. This is what matters most to you. Now, here's where having a recording of yourself presenting or speaking can be very helpful. If you do, watch yourself and note everything that reflects your core values. It can be how you look, your slides, the quality of your ideas, how you interact with the room, the sound of your voice, your movements, your posture, the words that you use to make your points, etc., etc. If you don't have a recording, things that can inform your assessment can be the feedback you're getting, your own sensations while speaking, your thoughts and emotions, and the data that you can observe from your choice of content, your slides, your appearance, and your behavior. Again, make a list of all the elements in your content and in your delivery that reflect your core values. And obviously, you want this list to be as long as possible. But if it's not that long, don't worry about it too much at this point. It just shows that there's room to play. Also note if there are any strong indicators of other values that you might display. For example, you might have a value for humor personally, but in your presentation, you're demonstrating conscientiousness or thoroughness. So rather than making a joke or two here and there, or having a little funny expression on your face, you might go very thoroughly through a case study that you've researched in detail. So with these 2 lists, ask yourself the question, how congruent am I with my core values when I'm speaking or presenting? And put a number on it. What gets measured gets improved. So evaluate it from 1 to 10 or give it a percentage. The more specific you are, the more targeted your fine-tuning is going to be. So let's say that your core values are health, connection, and excellence. And you rate yourself an average of 70% congruence across all of these based on your list of observations from your last keynote. The next thing to do is go back to your assessment of the audience and the situation and check if one of your values might be more important, more relevant, given that specific context. Let's imagine that you have to deliver some bad news to your board of directors. They will need to be reassured that things will get better. This is where excellence can be helpful, right? One of your core 3 values. Showing them that you're on top of the situation, that you know the best way forward, that you've looked into all the best possible solutions will help in reassuring your board of directors that you've got a hold on things. Finally, consider how you can improve your illustration of this value, excellence, by 10% in your upcoming board meeting. What could you adjust in your voice, your vocabulary, your preparation, your process, your visuals, or any other element to up the perception of excellence by just 10%. Having a manageable increment to make progress will feel like you're able to do it, like it's not overwhelming. So just go 10% at a time, and then over a number of presentations, you'll begin to see an actual change. And if people know you, even an improvement of 10% will be noticeable. So to recap, first off, understand what the audience and the situation require of you. Next, map out your core values. Number 3, collect data to make sure you know how congruent you are with your core values while presenting. Step 4, put a number on that congruence. What gets measured gets improved. Step 5, look back at your audience and situation assessment and identify which of your core values, or perhaps an entirely different value, is most relevant for that specific context. And finally, 6, consider what to adjust in order to up your display of that value by 10%. Rinse and repeat. So if you want to feel more like yourself while presenting and are not quite sure how, use your core values as your North Star. And to make sure you don't miss out on any of our upcoming SpeakerPath episodes, hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to the SpeakerPath podcast. And if you have any thoughts or questions that you'd like to share, put them in the comments and I will respond to all of them to the best of my ability. And finally, remember, ideas don't speak for themselves. People do.